how to use all this equipment. So if we goof up, we at least have an excuse.
I'm real great on this Zoom, let me tell you.
Okay, the sound is all right?
I think so. Let me try the other one. Try F2, it seems to be better.
Dun, 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 dun. Hello, hello.
Oh, I think F1 sounds less echoey.
Okay, F1 is less echoey then.
Now give me another.
Now we're back to F1. Dun, dun, dun.
That's fine.
Okay.
She's recording, but...
All right, it's about time we got started then, since it's already 7 or 8 minutes after the hour. Speaker's night. If you didn't get one of these, then, you know, somebody next to you has one, and there's a whole stack of them out in the hall that people keep walking past.
One for you too. Don't be embarrassed.
Okay. Oh, stop it, people. Okay, so that this wouldn't take all night, which it seems to be already, we actually have, how many entries? Is it 22, 23? I don't remember now. 23? 23 entries, 9 of them double, and so we told everybody who was double entered, pick one. So we'll have a nice little show of 14 performances. And you can see we have several different categories here, and we're starting off with interpretive reading poetry. And we have from Alicia Hurd, The Lady of Shalott.
In Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott, a young woman must remain in a tower. Her only contact to the outside world is by images seen in a mirror. For if she is to gaze out that window, a mysterious curse will fall upon her. On either side the river lie, long fields of barley and of rye, that clothe the wood and meet the sky, and through the field the road runs by, to many towered Camelot. And up and down the people go, gazing where the lilies blow, round an island there below, the island of Shalott. Willows whiten, aspens quiver, little breezes dust and shiver through the wave that runs forever by the island in the river, flowing down to Camelot. 4 gray walls and 4 gray towers overlook a space of flowers, and the silent isle embowers the Lady of Shalott. There she weaves by night and day, a magic web with colors gay. She has heard a whisper say, a curse is on her if she stay to look down to Camelot. She knows not what the curse may be, and so she weaveth steadily, and little other care hath she, the Lady of Shalott. And moving through a mirror clear that hangs before her all the year, shadows of the world appear. There she sees a highway near, winding down to Camelot. And sometimes through the mirror blue, the knights come riding 2 and 2. She hath no loyal knight and true, the Lady of Shalott. But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror's magic sights, for often through the silent nights a funeral with plumes and lights and music went to Camelot. Or when the moon was overhead, came 2 young lovers lately wed. I am half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott. A bowshot from her bower eaves, he rode between the barley sheaves. The sun came dazzling through the leaves, and flamed upon the brazen greaves of bold Sir Lancelot. A red-crossed knight forever kneeled to a lady in his shield, that sparkled on the yellow field beside remote Shalott. His broad clear brow in sunlight glowed, on burnished hoofs his war horse trode. From underneath his helmet flowed his coal-black curls. As he rode down to Camelot. From the banks and from the river he flashed into the crystal mirror. Tira lira by the river sang Sir Lancelot. She left the web, she left the loom, she made 3 paces through the room. She saw the water lily bloom. She saw the helmet and the plume. She looked down to Camelot. Out flew the web and floated wide. The mirror cracked from side to side. The curse has come upon me, cried the Lady of Shalott. In the stormy east wind straining, the pale yellow woods were waning, the broad stream in his banks complaining, heavily the low sky raining over-towered Camelot. Down she came and found a boat, beneath a willow left afloat, and round about the prow she wrote, the Lady of Shalott. And down the river's dim expanse, like some bold seer in a trance, seeing all his own mischance, with a glassy countenance did she look to Camelot. And at the closing of the day, she loosed the chain, and down she lay. The broad stream bore her far away, the Lady of Shalott. Lying robed in snowy white, that loosely flew to left and right, the leaves upon her falling light, through the noises of the night, she floated down to Camelot. And as the boat head wound along the willowy hills and fields among, they heard her singing her last song, the Lady of Shalott. Heard a carol, mournful, holy, chanted loudly, chanted lowly, till her blood was frozen slowly, and her eyes were darkened wholly, turned to towered Camelot. For ere she reached upon the tide the first house by the waterside, singing in her song, she died, the Lady of Shalott. Under tower and balcony, by garden wall and gallery, a gleaming shape she floated by, dead pale between the houses high, silent, into Camelot. Out upon the wharfs they came, knight and burgher, lord and dame, and round the prow they read her name, the Lady of Shalott. Who is this, and what is here? And in the lighted palace near died the sound of royal cheer, and they crossed themselves for fear, all the knights at Camelot. But Lancelot mused a little space. He said, she has a lovely face. God in his mercy lend her grace, the Lady of Shalott.
Okay, then blazing ahead, we go on to prose, which is all the writing that's not poetry, so naturally novels and essays and such. And in this case, Kerry has chosen some passages from Jonathan Harker's journal in Dracula.
I will be reading excerpts from Jonathan Harker's journal in the novel Dracula, written by Bram Stoker. In these excerpts, the true nature of the Count is revealed. I only slept a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window, and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder. But there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it, except myself. This was startling, and, coming on the top of so many strange things, was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always have when the Count is near. But at that instant, I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there. Later that evening, Jonathan becomes restless and goes to the window, only to find the Count leaving the manor in a most peculiar fashion. The window at which I stood was tall and deep, stone-mullioned, and though weather-worn, was still complete, but it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man by the neck and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, I could not mistake the hands, which I had had so many opportunities of studying. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow. But I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and, by thus using every projection and inequality, move downwards with considerable speeds, just as a lizard moves along a wall. What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about with terrors that I dare not think of. Later that evening, Jonathan no longer wishes to stay in the company of the Count. However, the Count persuades him to remain one more night, using terrifying means. With a stately gravity, Dracula, with the lamp, preceded me down the stairs and along the hall. Suddenly, he stopped. Hark! Close at hand came the howling of many wolves. It was almost as if the sound sprang up at the raising of his hand, just as the music of a great orchestra seems to leap under the baton of the conductor. After a pause of a moment, he proceeded, in his stately way, to the door, drew back the ponderous bolts, unhooked the heavy chains, and began to draw it open. To my intense astonishment, I saw that it was unlocked. Suspiciously, I looked all around, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves without grew louder and angrier, their red jaws with champing teeth and their blunt-clawed feet as they leaped came in through the opening door. I knew that to struggle at the moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, I could do nothing. But still, the door continued slowly to open, and only the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly, it struck me that this might be the moment and the means of my doom. I was to be given to the wolves, and at my own instigation. There was a diabolical wickedness in the idea, great enough for the Count, and as a last chance I cried out, "Shut the door! I shall wait till morning!" and covered my face with my hands to hide my tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great bolts clanged and echoed through the hall as they shot back into their places. In silence, we returned to the library, and after a minute or two, I went to my own room. The last I saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of.
Okay, these are different speech categories for competition. And so in the interpretive reading categories, which include prose, poetry, and literary program, not very much movement is allowed. If say, for instance, Kerry were to start gesturing and acting it out, they would say, this is a speaking category, not an acting category, and she would get graded down for that. And so our interpretive readers have to do as much as they can with just facial expression and with the tone of their voice. So now we move from Victorian poetry to Gothic horror to whatever you call what John does. Storytelling is a category where they get 5 minutes to tell a story. And the way they separate it from acting is by making people sit on a stool. Now, we all know that real storytellers actually do get up and move around and do a lot of things, and that it actually does overlap with acting. But for contest, they need a way to keep it separate. And so for storytelling, you got to stay on the stool. You can act things out as much as you can, but you have to try to connect with your audience as a narrator. And then if you're playing characters, you can act from the stool. We have 3 different stories tonight, and they're very different styles. And we've noticed that John's style is probably a little more improvisatory than the others. In fact, he's changed his story so many times that we think you're going to hear the F-bomb, but we're really not quite sure.
Let's find out.
Go ahead, John.
All right. As mostly everybody is in speech team, I am a student. And as a student, I am required to go to classes every day. Now, some of these classes are quite fun and liberal. You're allowed to yell out and the such. Well, as nice as being allowed to yell out is, of course. Now, in one of these classes, the F-bomb happened. Now, the F-bomb is a fun story I like to tell. We have 2 characters. One, Jennifer and Jeff. Jennifer and Jeff were hormone-driven, super flirts. Oh, they were terrible. They're the people you see and just want to slap, really. Now, Jennifer and Jeff sit, like, next to each other. Jennifer sits behind Jeff, and Jeff sits in front of Jennifer. Now, what Jennifer likes to do is kick Jeff in the buns. Jeff likes to scream and go, woohoo! Well, one time, Jeff got kind of angry, and without Jennifer's knowledge, Jeff grabbed Jennifer's leg, and she launched the F-bomb. And it wasn't a silent F-bomb, it was a big F-bomb. Now, in my school, they make you get 1 hour per letter. That's 4 hours for Jennifer. So, hormone-driven Jeff thinks he's, ooh, I'm gonna be the man, I'm gonna take the hit. That'll make me cool. So, he does. He tells the teacher, hey, it was my fault. We now have an accumulation between the 2 of 8 hours. Jeff gave up his manliness and went for that, it wasn't me, please no. Yeah, so we have really 2 angry people who've launched the F-bomb. Now, I'm a jokester. I like to laugh, I like to make people laugh. So, I yell out in the middle of class, fuck! And I don't know how it happened, but the teacher, right after I had launched mine, said the word luck. If I had to compare Jennifer to any kind of thing, I'd say a Viking. Big girl. That big. And she spun around, pointed her finger, and started, well, probably launching some more F-bombs. Let me tell you, she was not happy. She was taking people down with her into the flames. Well, the thing was, she wasn't pointing at me. She was pointing at a guy that had nothing to do with it. And Viking Girl was towering over the poor child. He was cringing in fear. And being the nice guy that I am, I don't want anybody to get in trouble for something I did. So I go, it was me. I said, fuck. She spins around on me. I am afraid. I'm not a big guy. She's huge. So the teacher, he tries to reconcile it. He's like, no, nothing wrong happened here. But you couldn't calm Jennifer down, you know. So he goes, John, you have 2 hours. I'm like, no. My friends are like, no. One friend, bless his heart, was like, no, I'm taking this to the office. I'm like, yeah. But it ends up, at the end of the class, I was told to come up to the front. And once everybody left, I was told I had two options. The two options were join speech team or get the 2 hours. I have a spotless detention record, so I wanted to keep it that way. So I'm like, all right, I'll join speech team. Yeah, cool people join speech team. So I forget about it for about a week and a half, let's say. And I'm sitting in a class, and I hear, well, John Corelli, please come to the office. I'm like, they call my name? I was like, yeah, they did, dude. So I head on up, and my name rarely gets called, so I'm like, okay. I didn't mess anything up, and I didn't hurt anybody, and nobody hurt me, so I should be good. I get up, there's this little folded note. I'm like, okay. I open it up. Mr. Teacher Man had written me a little note telling me I had to join the speech thing. So I'm like, oh, this is sad, and I throw it away, and I go down to my next class. I'm sitting there reading my nice little book, and boom, here he is! He followed me to get me to join this. So I finally relented, and I'm like, okay, this is quite weird. Don't follow me anymore, I'll try it out. So I tried it out, and I had some fun with it. And this is what happened. Thank you.
Two things. You see what I mean. And I am not said Mr. Teacher Man. Literary program is another reading category. It's sort of the hybrid of poetry and prose. And Emily Roth took an interesting approach to this. She took a poem by Byron, and she reads part of the poem, and then she wrote her own prose to go in between and to sort of take on the character. So this is Darkness, a literary program by George Gordon, Lord Byron, and our own Emily Roth.
He's already introduced me, so I'll start in with the rest of my introduction. I have chosen to base my program on the differences between light and dark. When I enter into poetry, I will be taking on the character of Darkness, who will be explaining your dreams to you. And what Darkness is trying to say to you is that you can't blame the faults of the world on darkness, only on ourselves, and that staying on the sunny side of life won't always keep you safe. Darkness. Cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies under stars and over hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter. What a pity. Oh, hello. You're not supposed to be awake. I've just come to tell you about your dreams. You know who I am? I have just described myself. I can't be seen, can't be felt? Oh, come on. Just call me Darkness. But that is who I am, you know. And I've come to help you. No. Laugh at you. For I know your dreams. You had a dream which was not all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space, rayless and pathless, and the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and went and came and brought nor day, and men forgot their passions and dread, this their desolation, and all hearts were chilled into a selfish prayer for light. What is light anyway? Doesn't the same kind of hurt happen in the sun as in the shade? Who is responsible for this label I've been given? Is it you? No. But mind you, until now I have remained obedient. For so long I have kept silent. But
no longer. I'm tired of the irresponsible pointing of the finger that continues to occur. For as I descend upon the earth of today, I notice an abundant amount of hatred. That is why I'm here. I'm drawn to it. If I'm not mistaken, which I know I am not, I notice a crescendoing level of war and disquietude in your eyes. Will you not admit that lovely hatred found among beings of noticeable differences? The fish and the birds are as of yet still kept at bay. They are not to mingle, not to meet. Why? The sun and the moon rarely speak of likeness, and spring and fall, why do they never foregather? If you can offer me a justifiable reason, I will promise to be of no longer torment, and will let you sleep. What? Have you nothing? That is shameful. And I, darkness, and being blamed for the nightmares, the tears, the agony, the defeat. Darkness. For centuries old, I have been the one accused of being the antagonist, which is quite fun considering I can get away with so much. But that's not the point. The point is that I'm the one accused of scaring young children. Oh, mommy, turn on the light, I'm frightened. A fearful hope was all the world contained. Forests were set on fire, but hour by hour they fell and faded. Am I not still here as clear as ever? Darkness will never fade. And the crackling chunks extinguished with a crash, and all was black. The brows of men by the despairing light wore an unearthly aspect, as if by fits the fascists fell upon them. Some lay down and hid their eyes and wept, and others laid. And others hurried to and fro, and others clenched their hands upon their hands, and they smiled. And others fed their funeral piles with fuel and looked up with mad disquietude upon the dull sky and the pall of the past world, and then again with curses cast them down upon the dust and gnashed their teeth and howled. The birds shrieked and terrified did flutter on the ground and flap their useless wings. All this in your dreams. How can you say the dark and gloomy covering of the past world? What a joke. Even today, and believe me, I have been around for centuries, I still thoroughly enjoy watching the spectacles of human nature. As darkness, I can creep and lurk wherever I feel fit. You can't even begin to realize how much I know of your nature. Man is the ally, man is the foe. Man is the reason for the disquietude, you know. Not me. Whatever disquietude you feel wreathing in this world of yours is not because of the lack of sunshine, for you brought it upon yourselves in the way you gossip, fight, backstab, exploit, cheat, leave, and kill those of your brethren. And war. We can't forget about war. Happens to be my favorite pastime, so thank you for including it. And war, which for a moment was no more, did glut himself again. A meal was brought with blood, and each sate sullenly apart, gorging himself in gloom. No love was left. All earth was but one thought, and that was death, immediate and inglorious. Death. The absolute darkness. And the pang of famine fed upon all entrails. Men died, and their bones were tuneless as their flesh. The meager by the meager were devoured. Even dogs assailed their masters, all save one. And he was faithful to a course, and kept the birds and beasts and famished men at bay, till hunger clung them, or the dropping dead lured their lank jaws. Himself sought out no food, but with a piteous and perpetual moan and a quick, desolate cry, licking the hand which answered not with a caress, he died. He died. He cared for you, protected you. He died for you. Without a single caress of love, he did this for you. Suppose I should no longer be laughing. I feel sorry for the dog. But I suppose I should remember this is just your dream, isn't it? You really should have happy dreams. Just because I like this stuff doesn't mean you have to. But wait. Let me finish. This is the part where the world goes to hell. The world was void, the populous and the powerful was a lump, seasonless, herbless, treeless, manless, lifeless. A lump of death, a chaos of hard clay. The rivers, lakes, and ocean all stood still, and nothing stirred within their silent depths.
Ships sailorless lay rotting on the sea, and their masts fell down piecemeal. As they dropped, they slept on the abyss without a surge. The waves, dead. The tides were in their grave. The moon, their mistress, had expired before. The winds were withered in the stagnant air, and the clouds perished. Darkness had no need of aid from them, for she was the universe. I am the universe. I am. I am darkness, that which has the knowledge of 1,000 centuries back. I was the first to suffer from rejection, and I hold the key to your dreams. I'm finished with you for now. So lay back and close your eyes. But listen to the messages that I bring to you, and listen for my whisper. For you have had a dream, which was not all a dream, but I leave the meaning up to you.
Okay. Radio news is a category in which the audience doesn't even get to see the contestant. But that's not the way we do it here tonight. This is Charles, and he didn't know that you'd all be looking at him, and so he's terrified.
Actually, I'm terrified because he just about hit me with the door.
That too. Would you like to sit down, or?
Oh no, I want to stand.
You want to stand? Okay.
I'm just joking.
Okay.
Let
me say, how radio news works, do we have time cards? Okay. How radio news works is that the contestant is in another room, and the judges don't even get to see him or her. They just hear the voice reading the news. And in that news there will be a commercial, various news that he's spent a half an hour cutting and putting together ahead of time, and a news flash that will just be handed to him sometime in the presentation. You're disqualified if you're under 4 minutes or over 5 minutes. And so by far the most disqualifications come in the category of radio news, just because you're trying to fit into that close time frame there. I'm just checking on you, Charles. So today it's not quite radio news because, like I said, you can see him. It's sort of a pseudo TV news. And not only that, this is one of the packets that we had at the contest a couple weeks ago, and so the news is kind of old. But this is the category of radio news. Charles Russell.
You ready with those cards, Sam?
Oh, yes.
Anybody know where my other page is?
You leave them in the hall?
Probably. Sam, would you like to help me with some improv? Anybody? Sam, I'll hold the time cards for you.
Never happened.
These are time cards. They have times on them in minutes. I press this button and this dial keeps going. And then I go like this. And he has less time left. And finally you go down through these lovely things and you get to here, which is of course half a minute. And when that is up, he's done and we give him the boot. And that is how these lovely pieces of paper work.
Thank you, time card Sam. And now Charles Russell for the news.
That was Smooth Criminal by Alien Ant Farm on KLLG 97.3 with the best of the zeros. Hello, I'm Charles Russell reporting to you for KLLG Radio News. In international news, Afghanistan's interim leader heads home Friday after meeting in London with British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Hamid Karzai pleaded for more international troops and keep the peace in his country. Blair declined to make a commitment, but said he would work with the cooperating countries. In Islamabad, Pakistan, the Wall Street Journal's managing editor is pleading for the life of reporter Daniel Pearl. In an open letter to the reporter's kidnappers, he says Pearl can be messenger and explain his kidnapper's cause. By email Thursday, the group said it would kill Pearl if its demands are met by Friday. For national news, in San Francisco, he may have simply walked across a fertilized lawn, but whoever he was, he caused a major headache for thousands of United Airlines passengers at San Francisco International Airport yesterday. The terminal was shut down for 2.5 hours while authorities searched for the man, whose shoes had triggered a screening machine's alarm. Guards wanted to question him about the explosive residue on his shoes, but he slipped into the crowd before he could be stopped. The man was not found. Officials say he may have been on one of the 3 planes allowed to take off after the alarm was sounded. And for an important news flash, a 5-car pileup at Dubuque Street exit on Interstate 80 near Iowa City is tying up traffic. Highway patrol and emergency vehicles are on the scene until traffic can be redirected. Motorists are asked to avoid the area until 3 p.m. In Atlanta, President Bush is warning rogue states they face the justice of this nation if they terrorize America or its allies. He didn't identify those nations, but he says to countries building weapons of mass destruction, "You too are on watch list." Bush remarks at a rally in Atlanta following his State of the Union attack on Iraq, Iran, and North Korea that he called an axis of evil, bent on acquiring nuclear arms. Over to our state news in Des Moines. A special task force has been formed to fight Iowa's growing methamphetamine problem. After use of the drug seemed to level off in 2000, officials say a record number of meth sites was found last year as demand edged up again. The task force, paid for with federal funds, will focus on 17 countries where most of the labs are discovered. The counties are Polk, Story, Dallas, Jasper, Madison, Warren, Marion, Union, Clark, Lucas, Monroe, Wapello, Ringgold, Decatur, Wayne, Appaloosa, and Davis counties. In Iowa City, architects say even though paint continues to fall and floorboards continue to buckle, the old Capitol in Iowa City has stabilized. The 160-year-old building sustained millions of dollars in damage last November in a battle to fight a fire that destroyed the Golden Dome and cupola. Water damaged the interior. The fire was caused by a contractor using a heat gun or torch to remove asbestos coating. Officials toured the old Capitol yesterday to get another look on what needs to be done. University spokesman Gary Nagel says the first phase of the renovation will likely be rebuilding the dome. The second phase will be to restore the interior. And now for a word from our sponsors. The first and only mouthwash works all day to fight bad breath. Introducing Casey's Daily Care for Healthy Breath. This mouthwash keeps working long after others would stop working, giving you protecting morning, noon, and night. In fact, Casey's comes with the money-back guarantee. If you are not completely satisfied, we will refund you the cost of your purchase. Casey's Daily Care for Healthy Breath can be found at Bridger's Eastside Pharmacy at 9th and Waukee. And now for your KLLG weather, brought to you by Casey's Daily Care. Today becoming mostly cloudy, highs in the mid to upper 30s, light and variable wind becoming south 10 to 15 miles an hour in the afternoon. Tonight expected to be mostly cloudy, lows in the teens, southwest wind 5 to 15 miles an hour. For your sports, in top 25 basketball, number 15 UCLA pulled out a 67 to 65 win over number 25 Southern California. This has been Charles Russell reporting for KLLG 97.3. Ooh, that was
Yeah, I know you're close.
Within time.
Thank you, Time Card Sam. And now for more time cards, Sam.
No, I must change my costume.
Dun, dun, dun. Sam, who most of you are used to seeing in all kinds of scary and unusual antics, is about to show you a more serious side here.
I know, you never thought it was there, did you?
So, in case you haven't had enough Victorian poetry for this evening, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came.
Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came by Robert Browning expresses a Victorian longing for something lost, which is very common in Victorian pieces. This piece is about one man's journey to come to terms with his failure as a man. My first thought was, he lied in every word, that hoary cripple with malicious eye, askance to watch the working of his lie on mine, and mouth scarce able to afford suppression of the glee that pursed and scored its edge at one more victim gained thereby. If at his counsel I should turn aside into that ominous tract which, all agree, hides the dark tower, yet acquiescingly I did turn as he pointed, neither hope rekindling at the end descried, so much as add gladness that some end might be. Thus I had so long suffered in this quest, heard failure prophesied, so oft been writ, so many times among the band, to wit, the knights to whom the dark tower's search addressed their steps, that just to fail as they seemed best, and all the doubt was now, should I be fit? So, quiet as despair, I turned from him, that hateful cripple, out of his highway into the path he pointed. All the day had been a dreary one at best, and dim was settling to its close, yet shot one grim red leer to see the plain catch its astray. For mark, no sooner was I found pledged to that plain after a pace or two, than, pausing to throw backward a last view o'er the safe road, 'twas gone. Gray plain all around, nothing but plain to the horizon's bound. I might go on, naught else remained to do. I shut my eyes and I turned them on my heart. As a man calls for wine before he fights, I asked for one draught of earlier, happier sights, ere fitly I could hope to play my part. Think first, fight afterwards, the soldier's art. One taste of the old time sets all to rights. Not it. I fancied Cuthbert's reddening face beneath its garniture of curly gold. Dear fellow, till I almost felt him fold an arm in mine to fix me to the place the way he used. Alas, one night's disgrace. Out went my heart's new fire and left it cold. Giles, then, the soul of honor, there he stands frank as 10 years ago when knighted first. What honest man should dare, he said, he durst. Good, but the scene shifts. One hangman hands pinned to his breast a parchment. His own bands read it. Poor traitor, spit upon and cursed. Better this present than a past like that. Back therefore to my darkening path again. No sound, no sight as far as I could strain. Will the knight send a howlet or a bat, I asked, when something on the dismal flat came to arrest my thoughts and change their train. A sudden little river crossed my path, which, while I forded, good saints, how I feared to set my foot upon a dead man's cheek each step, or feel the spear I thrust to seek for hollows, tangled in his hair or beard. It may have been a water rat I speared, but it sounded as a baby's shriek. Glad was I when I reached the other bank. Now for a better country. Vain presage! Who were the strugglers? What war did they wage? Whose savage trample thus could pad the dank soil to a plash? Toads in a poison tank, or wild cats in a red-hot iron cage? And more than that, a furlong on, why there, what bad use was that engine for? That wheel, or brake, not wheel, that harrow, fit to reel men's bodies out like silk, with all the air of Tophet's tool, on earth left unaware, or brought to sharpen its rusty teeth of steel. Now blotches rankling, colored gay and grim, now patches where some leanness of the soils broke into moss, or substances like boils. Then came some palsied oak, a cleft in him like a distorted mouth that splits its rim, gaping at death, and dies while it recoils. Looking up, aware somehow I grew, spite of the dusk, the plain had given place all around to mountains, with such name to grace mere ugly heights and heaps now stolen in view. How thus they had surprised me. How to get from them was no clearer a case. Burningly it came upon me all at once, this was the place, those two hills on the right, like two bulls locked horn in fight, while to the left a tall scalped mountain. Dunce, dotard, a-dozing at the very nonce after a life spent training for the sight. What lay in the midst but the tower itself, the round squat turret, blind as the fool's heart, built of brown stone without a counterpart in the whole world. The tempest-mocking elf points to the shipman, thus the unseen shelf he strikes on, only when the timbers start. Not see, because of night perhaps? Why, day came back again for that. Before it left, the dying sunset kindled through a cleft. The hills, like giants at a hunting, lay, chin upon hand, to see the game at bay. Now stab and end the creature, to the heft! Not here, when noise was everywhere. It told, increasing like a bell, names in my ears of all the lost adventurers, my peers. How such a one was strong, and such was bold, and such was fortunate, yet each of old, lost. One moment knelled the woe of years. There they stood, ranged along the hillsides, met to view the last of me, a living frame for one more picture. In a sheet of flame I saw them and I knew them all, and yet dauntless the slughorn to my lips I set, and blew. Childe Roland to the dark tower came.
Sometimes Sam likes to play a little character that hears that and goes, "That was great. I don't know what that was, but that was great."
That's what the judge said.
Oh, that's what it was. Mocking the judges, are we? A few years ago, on the way to a speech contest, Matt Clendening threw together a literary program. Thought it was the funniest thing because we had a literary program that we had paid for, but someone had scratched and so we didn't have it. And so he just threw one together. He's like, "What does everybody have? Give me books, give me..." And he sat there all day and put together a literary program. Thought it was hilarious that he put together a spontaneous literary program and got to go on to state with it. Well, we've told that story probably too many times because we had an after-dinner speech open. And you see here it says Rumm, Garls. Sarah and Sam were like, oh, we have this great idea. We can do this. Can we have that after dinner speech? And this is the result of that. And for those of you who have had enough of the very Victorian and serious side of the poetry that we've had here for a while, now for something totally different. After dinner speaking, what is it, 5 minutes?
Something like that. Yeah, 5 minutes.
Hey, there are so many categories. I don't memorize them all. I check the book. But it's usually something of a humorous nature, and you decide who your audience is, and you make some kind of a point to them. And, well, we'll see how that works. Sarah Rumm with the...
Can you switch? You're going in and out now. Can you switch to F2?
F2?
Yeah. Okay,
Is that better? Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Hey, we are so high tech. And now for the second part of our program on F2.
Hi, y'all. Well, dinner's just about over. Edna, how are them chitlins on rye? Oh, good. Well, you just have no idea how tickled to death I am to speak to you fellow members of the Church of the NRA. Well, I am just so beside myself. First, I'd like to just say hello to my family, who's been very supportive of me being a reverend and all. Well, that's my wife, Uzi, in the back. Yes, Mrs. Uzi Gunn. She's Italian. And she's brought the children. Why, these are our children: Ray, Nail, Staple, BB, Elephant, Tommy, Top, Squirt,
and the baby twin boys Smith and Wesson. Why, she's brought the whole family. She even brought the pets. Why, that's our dog, 30-06, our twin pigs, Ramrod and Muzzleloader, our pet parrot, high-powered scope, and even our pet leech, night vision goggles. And just real quick there, I'd like to say hello to my dear special friend in the back, Mr. Charlton Heston. Hi, I'm just so happy and honored that you could hear me speak today. Well now, as I said, I am the Reverend Gunn, and I am a preacher at the church of the NRA located in Texas. And I have been asked to actually perform a little bit of a sermon for you tonight, and I chose for a topic, hunting orange. Yes, I know, we all hate the hunting orange, almost as much as we hate they that impose this upon us, the government. We all just love the government, don't we? Yeah. Well, this hunting orange, it's the law, but frankly, there's no point to it. Now, if I'm hunting in the woods, and I see something orange, and I see something that moves, I'm gonna shoot it if it's orange or not. And I'm gonna eat it if it's orange or not. And also, orange draws your attention, am I right? Of course I'm right. So it seems to me that it's dangerous to have orange on you. Picture this, y'all. You're in the forest, hunting for game. You got your 22-foot point, dual-barrel, triple-shot, semi-loaded, fully automatic Smith & Browning Super Scope cordon bleu with a walnut stock and hair trigger. And it's cocked and ready to go. All of a sudden, you see a flash of orange to your left, and you just go... And the government has just made you shoot and kill your brother Darryl. Now, we all see the terribleness of this. And nowhere in the good book of the Church of the NRA does it say anything about hunting orange. Being that the book is only 2 paragraphs long, we do pretty much whatever we want. Now, to end tonight, I'd like for you to all say with me the cherished 10 commandments of the NRA. Now, 1, thou shalt love thy gun as thy neighbor, and thy neighbor's gun. 2, thou shalt never relinquish thy shooting irons. 3, thou shalt not covet another's barrel. 4, thou shalt never take the name of Clint Eastwood in vain. 5, thou shalt not join the Navy. 6, thou shalt not remove thy safety in vain. 7, thou shalt remain well oiled at all times. 8, thou shalt watch the Beverly Hillbillies religiously and take notes on every episode. 9, thou shalt not be uncocked for no reason. And 10, thou shalt name all thy children Darryl, regardless of their sex. Well, thank you all, and sincerely, I hope to see you all next Sunday.
We honestly have no idea how the judges are going to take that. We're just going in prepared for anything. Sarah wanted to do it because she thinks that's hilarious, and obviously you did too, so. So that's a good thing, a little humor. Now then, I forgot to mention in Emily's literary program, she also used just a little bit of Tolkien to introduce it, the Riddle on Darkness, but you'll hear more of that. Mary's snickering over here. It's a scary snicker. She's going to read for you Riddles in the Dark from Tolkien's The Hobbit.
The Bagginses were a very respectable hobbit family, not only because they were rich, but because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. Mr. Bilbo Baggins was no exception, until one fateful day when he was accidentally chosen as the burglar and 14th companion and swept away in a quest to regain stolen dragon-guarded treasure. The Hobbit, written by J.R.R. Tolkien, tells of Bilbo's adventures and mishaps on the way there and back again. And in this particular selection, Bilbo finds himself lost and alone, deep underground in the Goblin Kingdom. I present to you Riddles in the Dark. The Hobbit jumped nearly out of his skin when the hiss came in his ears, and he suddenly saw the pale eyes sticking out at him. "Who are you?" he said, thrusting his dagger out in front of him.
"What is he, my precious?"
whispered Gollum, who always spoke to himself through never having anyone else to speak to. This is what he had come to find out, for he was not really hungry at the moment, only curious. Otherwise he would have grabbed first and whispered afterwards. "I'm Mr. Bilbo Baggins. I've lost the dwarves and I've lost the wizard, and I don't know where I am, and I don't want to know, if only I can get away."
"What's he got in his hands is?"
said Gollum, looking at the sword, which he did not quite like. "A sword, a blade out of Gondolin," said Gollum, and became quite polite.
"Perhaps he sits here and chats with it a bit, see, my precious. It likes riddles, perhaps it does it?"
He was anxious to appear friendly, at any rate for the moment, and until he found out more about the sword and the Hobbit, whether he was quite alone really, whether he was good to eat, and whether Gollum was really hungry. Riddles were all he could think of. Asking them and sometimes guessing them had been the only game he had ever played with the other funny creatures sitting in their holes in the long, long ago before he lost all his friends and was driven away alone and crept down into the dark under the mountains. "Very well," said Bilbo, who was anxious to agree, until he found out more about the creature and whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, and whether he was a friend of the goblins. "You asked first," he said, because he had not the time to think of a riddle. So Gollum hissed,
"What has roots as nobody sees, is taller than trees. Up, up it goes, and yet never grows."
"Easy," said Bilbo. "Mountain, I suppose."
"Does it guess easy? It must have a competition with us, my precious. If Precious asks and it doesn't answer, we eats it, my precious. If it asks us and we doesn't answer, then we does what it wants, eh? We shows it the way out, yes."
"All right," said Bilbo, not daring to disagree, and nearly bursting his brain to think of riddles that could save him from being eaten. 30 white horses on a red hill. First they champ, then they stamp, then they stand still. That was all he could think of to ask. The idea of eating was rather on his mind. It was a rather old one, too, and Gollum knew the answer as well as you do.
"Chestnuts, chestnuts," he hissed. "Teeth, teeth, my precious. But we has only 6.
Then he asked his second.
"It cannot be seen, it cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter." Unfortunately for Gollum, Bilbo had heard this sort of thing before, and the answer was all around him anyway. "Dark," he said, without even scratching his head or putting on his thinking cap. "A box without hinges, keys, or a lid, yet golden treasure inside is hid." He asked to gain time until he could think of a really hard one. This he thought a dreadfully easy chestnut, though he had not asked it in the usual words. But it proved a nasty poser for Gollum. He hissed to himself, and still he did not answer. He whispered and he spluttered. After some while, Bilbo became impatient. "Well, what is it?" he said. "The answer's not a kettle boiling over, as you seem to think from the noise you're making." "Give us a chance, let it give us a chance, my precious."
"Well," said Bilbo, after giving him a long chance, "what about your guess?" But suddenly Gollum remembered thieving from nests long ago, and sitting under the river bank teaching his grandmother to suck.
"Eggses," he hissed. "Eggses it is." Then he asked, "Alive without breath, as cold as death. Never thirsty, ever drinking, all in mail, never clinking."
He also in his turn thought this was a dreadfully easy one,
because he was always thinking of the answer. But he could not remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the egg question. All the same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo, who never had anything to do with the water if he could help it. He sat and cleared his throat once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, Gollum began to hiss with pleasure to himself.
Is it nice, my precious? Is it juicy? Is it scrumptiously crunchable?
He began to peer at Bilbo out of the darkness. Half a moment, said the hobbit, shivering. I gave you a good long chance just now.
It must make haste,
said Gollum, beginning to climb out of the boat onto the shore to get at Bilbo. But when he put his long webby foot in the water, a fish jumped out in fright and fell on Bilbo's toes. Ah, he said, it's cold and clammy. And so he guessed. Fish! Fish! He cried, it's fish! Gollum was dreadfully disappointed, but Bilbo asked another riddle as quick as ever he could, so that Gollum had to get back into his boat and think. No legs lay on one leg, 2 legs sat near on 3 legs, 4 legs got some. It was not really the right time for this riddle, but Bilbo was in a hurry. Gollum might have had some trouble guessing it if he had asked it at another time. As it was, talking of fish, no legs, was not so very difficult, and after that the rest was easy. A fish on a little table, man sitting at table on a stool, the cat has the bones. That, of course, is the answer, and Gollum soon gave it. Then he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible. This is what he said.
This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stone to meal, slays king, ruins town, and beats high mountain down.
Poor Bilbo sat in the dark thinking of all of the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard told of in tales, but not one of them had done all these things. He had the feeling the answer was quite different, and that he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and that is bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick in his mouth. He wanted to shout out, "Give me more time! Give me time!" But all that came out in a sudden squeal was, "Time! Time!" Bilbo was saved by pure luck. For that, of course, is the answer.
Okay, our second storyteller, and in this case, it's a retelling of an old story in a new and fun way. Cynthia Martens with a fractured fairy tale.
You all know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and all that whoop-de-doo about how Jack was a great hero and climbed that beanstalk. Well, I'm here to set the story straight. Yeah, of course the story's true, but it wasn't any boy that climbed that beanstalk in his lederhosen with a feather in his cap. That was me, Jackie, and I'm going to tell you how it really went. You see, once upon a time, I was living in this kingdom, downstairs and to the right, with my mother and our cow. Our cow was a talking cow. Perhaps you believe a cow can't talk? Perhaps you're an idiot. Anyway, we were living in our kingdom downstairs and to the right, and things had been going pretty badly for us. We were starving like your stomach is trying to gnaw through your backbone starving. So one day my mother turns to me and she says, "Jackie, we are starving and we have milked our cow for all she's worth. I want you to take her to the market and sell her." "But Mom, I thought you said we milked the cow for all she's worth," I replied, but she just looked down her nose at me and said, "Well, maybe we can salvage a few hamburgers off her or something, so just go." So I tied a rope around the cow's neck and went. Big problem. I had never been to market before, and I had no idea how to get there. So we wandered over hill and over dale until we were both well and properly lost. On we wandered this way until we came across the most peculiar person. She was dressed head to foot in brown rags, clutching a tree branch and mumbling to herself. "Beans, beans, why did I go into beans? My cousin went into hens. Not much better, but it was something.
When she saw me and the cow approaching, her eyes lit up like candles. She hobbled over to us and began petting my cow like it was a dog. Pretty cow, I want to take you home with me. Well, of course, I seized this opportunity. I sidled up to her and said, "This cow's for sale," wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But she only looked at me sadly and said, "I'm sorry, dearie, but I've left my purse at home. But I could trade you. I have these magic beans." I only stared blankly at her for a moment and then looked down at my cow. "Take the beans and run, you moron," the cow said to me. "We can make a fortune with those things on eBay. You get those and I'll ditch the loony and meet you back at the hovel." Sounded like a pretty good deal to me, so I agreed to the trade. I gave her the cow and I took the beans, and after getting directions, I wandered on back to my hovel to tell my mother all about it. But when she heard, she was not at all pleased. In fact, she was really angry. "You don't," she said to me. "You traded our only cow for beans." So I tried to explain to her, "Mom, they're magic beans." But this only made her angrier. I told her all about how we could make a fortune with them on eBay, and she just oh my gosh, she was angry. "You don't," she said to me again. "This is a medieval fairy tale. The internet hasn't been invented yet!" And then she snatched the beans out of my hand and tossed them out a hole in the hovel wall. And then, of all things, she sent me to my room, hungry, tired, and really disappointed. And I fell asleep. But while I slept, something magical happened. The beans that had been so carelessly tossed aside the night before sprouted into a gigantic beanstalk that stretched into the heavens until it pierced the very clouds. Upon waking, I saw the giant beanstalk. I mean, come on, how hard is it to notice a giant beanstalk? I stood on the ground and I stared up. Then, on a whim, I decided to climb it. Up and up and up I climbed through the clouds until I came to a whole new world. In front of me was a sidewalk, and at the end of that sidewalk stood an immense castle, the door to which was standing wide open. So, squaring my shoulders and summoning my courage, I walked right in to something hard and heavy that fell to the floor with a twang. "Oi, what way you going there?" said a voice from beneath my feet. I looked down, and what was there but a small golden harp with a figure carved in it, and it was looking back at me rather reproachfully. This surprised me no end, because talking cows aside, my little kingdom is not the kind of place where inanimate objects like to pause for a chat. So, crouching down, I straightened up that harp and I said, "Excuse me, did you talk?" "It's all right, you did a wee bit of talking there when you bumped into me," said the cow. Well, I mused over the possibilities for a moment of a talking harp on the marketplace, and came to my decision rather quickly. I reached out to seize that harp, but just then, the most horrible voice I had ever heard boomed out from somewhere above me. "Eeny, meeny, chilly beany, I smell tofu." And I realized it must be the smell of the beanstalk clinging to my clothes, and that at any moment the owner of that terrible voice could come downstairs and catch me. So, quick as a whistle, I snatched up that harp and ran out the door. But instead of heading for the beanstalk, I made a sharp left turn and hid behind a giant bush. Just then, the most putrid beast I'd ever seen came stumbling out the castle door. Oh my gosh, its hair and beard were matted with dirt and grease and grime. Its mouth hung open stupidly, revealing yellow teeth, and there was drool coming out. Well, anyway, as he fee-fi-fo fumbled around looking for the source of the tofu smell, I snuck back inside to see what else I could borrow. "If you want something really nice, I'd look in that room right there," said the little harp to me. So I opened the door. I was expecting something great, right? A goose. "Excuse me? Are you a goose?" "Darn right, I'm a talking goose, and not just any goose neither. I'm the goose that laid the golden eggs." That sort of made it better, so I decided I'll take them both. I tucked the goose under one arm and the harp under the other, but at just that moment, that horrible voice boomed in from outside once again. "Eeny, meeny, chilly beany, I smell patchouli. Egads, me castle's been invaded by yuppies." So I ran ran for the door once again, but it was too late. The giant saw me and gave chase. His footsteps crashed behind me like mini earthquakes as I ran for the beanstalk. I seized it and began scurrying down as fast as I could, but he followed me. Luckily, I was much smaller and faster and reached the ground first. My mother saw me coming out pretty much a hole in the hovel wall and came out to greet me, but instead of pausing to chat, I merely tossed the merchandise at her, snatched up the axe beside our woodpile, and began hacking at that beanstalk until with a giant crack and a bellow from the giant, it fell hard right on my house. But it was okay, because with the goose and the harp and the homeowner's insurance, me and my mother built ourselves a condo in the medieval equivalent of Florida, and we're now living happily ever after.
And that's so much fun that it's kind of sad she has to cut it down to 5 minutes by next Saturday.
Already did it!
Okay, we got the long version though, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure you didn't count different than I did. Okay, we have one contestant in acting. And you want to introduce this yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
My introduction all prepared.
Because every time I introduce somebody, they say, "You took my introduction."
Okay, I'll be performing 2 monologues from 2 different characters in The Matchmaker. Both of these women want to marry the same man. All right. Of course I shall marry Mr. Vandergelder. There's your answer. I shall certainly marry Horace Vandergelder if he asks me. Do I love him? Of course I don't love him, but I have 2 good reasons for marrying him just the same. In the first place, I shall marry Mr. Vandergelder to get out of the millinery business. I've hated it from the first day I had anything to do with it. I hate hats. I cannot stand being accused of being a wicked woman when I have nothing to show for it. All millineresses are suspected of being wicked women. Why, half the time all those women come into my shop merely to look at me. They enjoy the suspicion, but they aren't sure. If they were sure that I was a wicked woman, they wouldn't put foot in this place again. Do I go to restaurants? No, it would be bad for business. The only men I ever meet are feather merchants. Why, I tell you, either I marry Horace Vandergelder or I break out of this place like a fire engine. I'll go to every ball and opera and ballet in New York City. But what I think Mr. Vandergelder is, and it's very important, I think he'd make a good fighter. I tell you, the best part of being married is the fights. The rest is merely so-so. Peter Malloy, my late husband, God rest him, was a fine arguing man. Why, he'd fight for hours on end. I pity the woman whose husband slams the door and walks out of the house at the beginning of a fight. Why, Peter Malloy would even throw things, and there's no pleasure to equal that. Why, Peter Malloy was a fine arguing man, and I tell you what, Horace Vandergelder would be too. I've a mind to marry him. Ephraim, I'm going to get married again. Ephraim, I'm going to marry Horace Vandergelder for his money. I'm going to send it out doing all the things that you taught me. Oh, it won't be a marriage in the sense that we had one, Ephraim, but I'm tired. I'm tired of living from hand to mouth, and I'm asking your permission. Ephraim, will you give me away? Money. Money. It's like the sun we walk under. It can kill, or it can cure. Mr. Vandergelder's money. Mr. Vandergelder's never tired of saying that most of the people in this world are fools. And in a way, he's right, isn't he? Himself, Irene, Cornelius, myself. But what I really think the problem is that, well, we're all fools. And we're all in danger of destroying the world with our folly. And either you choose to be a human being and live among them, or you live alone. As for me, I've decided to live among them. I wasn't always so. When my husband first died, I retired into myself. Yes, in evenings I'd put out the cat, and I'd lock the door, and I'd make myself a little rum toddy, and before I went to bed, I'd say a little prayer, thanking God that I was independent, that no one else's life was mixed up with mine. And when 10 o'clock sounded from Trinity Church Tower, I'd fall off to sleep, and I was a perfectly contented woman. But one night, after 2 years of this, an oak leaf fell out of my Bible. Perfectly good oak leaf. I placed it there on the night that my husband asked me to marry him. But it was without color and without life. And I suddenly realized that for a long time I had not shed one tear, nor had I for one moment thought that something wonderful might turn up. And on that moment, I decided to rejoin the human race. Yes, we are all fools, and we're all in danger of destroying the world with our folly. But the only way to keep us out of harm is to give us the 4 or 5 human pleasures that are our right in life. The difference between a little bit of money and no money at all is enormous, and it can shatter the world. And the difference between a little money and an enormous amount of money is very slight, but it also can shatter the world. Money. I've always felt that money, pardon the expression, is like manure. It's not worth a thing unless it's spread about, encouraging young things to grow. At least, that's the opinion of the second Mrs. Vandergelder.
Return with us now to the Victorian era. Huh?
It's French.
Yeah, I know.
It's not big.
Okay, she informs me that it's French, and so it can't be Victorian, whatever. Victor Hugo, I'm just thinking time period. And we've joked about this, the idea that I put on the title here, Les Misérables, and we thought she should come with the whole book and say, Chapter 1, and scare you to death. But she's actually chosen a very nice chapter entitled Deep Waters, Dark Shadows. Angie Vaughn.
Victor Hugo, one of the greatest authors of his time, nearly always wrote his books with the purpose of influencing the way his readers thought and hopefully the way his society functioned. Les Misérables is no exception. In a chapter titled Deep Waters, Dark Shadows, Hugo reminds us that while society is sailing forward to great new heights, we're leaving helpless souls in our wake to drown in the sea. Man overboard! Who cares? The ship sails on. The wind is up. The ship must keep to its destined course. It passes on. The man disappears and reappears. He sinks and rises again to the surface, hollers, stretches out his hands. They do not hear him. The ship, staggering under the gale, is straining every rope. The sailors and passengers no longer see the drowning man. His miserable head is only a point in the vastness of the billows. Harold's cries of despair into the depths. What a point is that specter, that disappearing sail. He watches it, follows it frantically, moves away, grows dim, diminishes. He was just there. One of the crew, he walked up and down the deck with the rest. He had his share of air and sunlight. He was a living man. Now what has become of him? He slipped, he fell. It's all over. He's in the monstrous deep. There is nothing beneath his feet but the yielding, fleeing element. The waves, torn and scattered by the wind, close around him hideously. The rolling abyss bears him away. Tatters of water are flying around his head. A populace of waves spit on him. Big openings half swallow him. Each time he sinks, He glimpses yawning precipices full of dark, frightful, unknown tendrils seize him, bind his feet, and draw him down. He feels he's becoming the great deep. He's part of the foam, the billows toss him back and forth. He drinks in bitterness. The voracious ocean is eager to devour him. The monster plays with his agony. It's all liquid hatred to him. He tries to defend, to sustain himself. He struggles, he swims. With his poor exhausted strength, he combats the inexhaustible. Still he struggles on. Where is the ship? Far away, barely visible on the pallid horizon. The wind blows in gusts. The billows overwhelm him. He raises his eyes, but sees only the ashen clouds. In his dying agony, he's part of the sea's immense insanity. He's part of his measurable madness. He hears sounds unknown to man, seemingly come from some terrible kingdom beyond. There are birds in the clouds, even as there are angels among human distresses. What can they do for him? They fly, sing, and soar, while he gasps. He feels buried by two infinities together, the ocean and the sky. One a tomb, the other a shroud. Night falls. He has been swimming for hours. His strength almost gone. The ship is a far-off thing where there were men. It's gone. He is alone in the terrible gloom of the abyss. He thinks, he strains, he struggles, feels beneath him invisible, shadowy monsters. He screams. Men are gone. Where is God? He screams, help! Someone help! He screams over and over. Nothing on the horizon, nothing in the sky. He implores the lofty sky, the endless waves, the reefs, all are deaf. He begs the storms, but impassive. They obey only the infinite. Around him, darkness, storm, solitude, wild unconscious tumult, the ceaseless churning of fierce waters. Within him, horror and exhaustion. Beneath him, the devouring abyss. No resting place. He thinks of the shadowy adventures of his limp body in the limitless gloom. The biting cold paralyzes him. His hands cramp shut and grasp it. Nothing. Winds, clouds, whirlwinds, blast, stars, all useless. What can he do? He yields to despair. Worn out, he seeks death. No longer resists. Gives up. And tumbles into the mournful depths of the abyss forever. Implacable march of human society, destroying men and souls in its way. Ocean repository of all that the law lets fall. Ominous disappearance of help, moral death. The sea is the inexorable night in which the penal code casts its victims. The sea is measureless misery. The soul drifting in that sea may become a corpse. Who shall restore it to life?
Okay, since it's quite possible that this could be on TV over and over again, let me make the correction there. It's not Victorian, he's a little bit later. Realism and naturalism.
Yeah, you go with her.
Naturalism, where the elements don't care for your puny life. Depressing stuff. I think you do it very well. Okay, improvisation. In improvisation, you have 5 minutes. You have to portray 2 characters in a situation. And you're ready, right? Need a chair?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do I have to?
No, he has to.
Yes, Norman, you have to. Reference to a Reader's Theater we did a while ago. Okay. You wanted to say that line, I know you did.
No.
I can hear you saying it from here. Okay. Nolan Simmons is going to be a leprechaun, a butcher, and the situation is having car trouble.
Get them now. Oh, shivered me timbers. My car broke down. What do I do now? Shake. Excuse me. I noticed you're having some car troubles. Get away, you big bad man. Hey, I can help you out. I'm a butcher after all. Butchers should know stuff about cars. I would be so grateful if you could help me out. Could you please? Sure, get out of the car and I'll help you out. Very well. So, what do you do first with my car? Well, first I take it apart the best I can. Shink! What kind of model is this? It's an Irish model. You find them nowhere around here. Irish model, eh? Shink! Guess I'll have to cut her open. No, don't hurt my baby! Well, can you pop the hood? Yes? Much better, all right. Woo! You don't want that kind of smoke around here. You call that a carburetor? I don't know, sir. Do you call that a carburetor? I wouldn't, just to be safe. For now, since we don't know what it's called, let's just call it a doodad. That's the doodad. Do you know what that is? I don't know. I just drive the car. Okay, we'll call that the splurcunchets, because lack of anything better to say. Very well, we have the doodad, I think that's what you called it, and there's splurcunchets. Yeah, you're catching on, little Irish dude. All right, I don't have a lot of equipment, just like a lot of knives. You think I could fix a car with a lot of knives? My great granny told me you could fix anything with a big enough knife. Very well, let's fix it, all right? I got this little pointy knife. Got big knife with sharp thing. Yeah. Are you sure you know what you're doing? I mean, you do have big knives and all. You're kind of scaring me with the big knives. Oh, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Ooh, found it. Excuse me, sir, you're starting to worry me. I will back up now and let you do all the work by yourself. Yeah, no problem, man. Okay, I take some silly putty that I got in my pocket here. I always carry some around, you know it's good for you. So you shove it there. Oh, there's the fountain. It's all done now. Yeah, maybe you should try it now. You know, just try it. Okay, I'll try it. It's not working. All right, I get so frustrated. Oh, what do you expect me to do? What do you expect a guy to do like this? Here's a knife. It's pointed at me. I'm just a little Irish man. I'm just a little leprechaun. What am I supposed to do? He's trying to kill me. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to do that. Here, knife away. There, don't freak out on me anymore. Well, even if your car isn't fixed, I'm gonna have to charge you for my services. Irish dudes don't carry money, do they? So, what are those little doodads in your, hanging from your rearview mirror? You think you can trade me some of those? Oh, my little doodads? They're always after me, Lucky Charms!
Isn't it strange that we are so proud to encourage such behavior? Okay. Our third storyteller. And we rearranged the schedule because that way his dad could bring his sister back from college so they could see him. And she's a former all-stater in this category. No pressure, little brother. And you can introduce your story as well, I guess. No sense in saying it twice.
Jesus heals a man born blind. This biblical passage is important because it tells of Jesus' opposition to the rigid enforcement of the law of Moses, in which strict rules had been enforced. It also introduces the idea of freedom from spiritual blindness, in which to see, you don't need to be learned, such as the teachers of the law or the Pharisees at that time, as featured in this passage. The text is taken from the New International Version, John chapter 9. As Jesus was walking, he saw a man by the side of the road who was blind from birth. When his disciples asked about him, he said, "This man is blind so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with his saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent, S-E-N-T. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now his neighbors, and those who had formerly seen him begging, saw him walking past and asked, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Others said, "No, it only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." Then they asked, "How is it that your eyes were opened then?" He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I washed, and now I can see." The Pharisees also heard about this, and so they sent for the man. "How is it that you can see now?" the Pharisees said, and so he also told them his story. "The man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. I went and washed, and I came home seeing." Now the Jews still did not believe that this man was blind from birth until they sent for the man's parents. Then they asked the parents, "Is this your son? How is it that now he can see? Was he blind from birth?" The parents replied, "He is our son. He was blind from birth, but how he can see now, we don't know. Who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." Now the Jews had said that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ, or Messiah, would be put out of the synagogue. So a second time they summoned the man. "Give glory to God," they said. We know that this man is a sinner. To this he replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see. To this, they hurled insults at him and said, how is it that now you can see? What did he do? How did he open your eyes? And he said, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want me to tell you again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they said, you were steeped in sin at birth. You are this man's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that this man is not from God. We don't even know where he comes from. To this the man said, now that is remarkable. You don't know where the man comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, how dare you lecture us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. When Jesus heard that he had been thrown out, he found the man and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? To this the man replied, who is he, Lord, that I may believe? Jesus said, you have seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. The man replied, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into the world, that the blind will see, and so that those who see will become blind.
For those of you watching at home, and his mother behind the camera, I forgot to mention his name, Andrew Witherspoon. And our final bit of poetry here, collection from Talon Miller. You can tell them what you're doing.
Good evening. I'm sure by this time you all want to go home, but tough cookies. I will be reading 2 pieces tonight, but normally I have them reversed. I thought, however, perhaps we should end on a light note. The first I will be reading tonight is sort of, we'll get there later. So, a little background on the first piece. This was written by Homer. It's from the Odyssey, which was written before your time. Now, Odysseus is returning from the Trojan War, but he has a few mishaps on the way because he made old Poseidon angry. At this point, he is trapped in a cave with a Cyclops. The Cyclops keeps eating his men, which is kind of disturbing. So Odysseus devises a brilliant plan and gives the Cyclops some wine. The Cyclops gets a bit tipsy and asks him for his name. In reply to this, Odysseus says, nobody. And this is the poem. Now by the gods I drove my big hand spike deep in the embers, charring it again, and cheered my men along with battle talk to keep their courage up. No quitting now. The pike of olive, green though it had been, reddened and glowed as if about to catch. I drew it from the coals, and my 4 fellows gave me a hand, lugging it near the Cyclops. As more than natural force nerved them, straight forward they sprinted, lifted it and rammed it deep in his crater eye, and I leaned on it, turning it as a shipwright turns a drill in planking, having men below to turn the 2-handled strap that spins it in the groove. So with our brand we bored that great eye socket, while blood ran out around the red-hot bar. Eyelid and lash were seared, the pierced ball hissed broiling, and the roots popped. In a smithy, one sees a white-hot axe head or an adze, plunged and wrung in cold tub, screeching steam the way they make soft iron hale and hard. Just so that eyeball hissed around the spike. The Cyclops bellowed, and the rock roared round him, and we fell back in fear. Clawing his face, he tugged the bloody spike out of his eye, threw it away, and with his wild hands went groping. Then he set up a howl for cyclopes who lived in caves on windy peaks nearby. Some heard him, and they came by divers way to clump around outside and call, "What ails you, Polyphemus? Why do you cry so sore in the starry night? You will not let us sleep. Sure no man's driving off your flock? No man has tricked you, ruined you?" Out of the cave, the mammoth Polyphemus roared in answer, "Nobody! Nobody's tricked me! Nobody's ruined me!" To this rough shout, they made a sage reply, "Ah, well, if nobody has played you foul, there in your lonely bed we are no use in pain given by great Zeus. Let it be your father, Poseidon, Lord, to whom you pray." The second piece, to relate it to the first, is also about a fight with a mythical beast. This one is a bit nonsensical, but hey, I like it. I'm sure you'll understand where it's coming from by and by. Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll.
"'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe.
Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Fubjub bird, and shun the Firmius Bandersnatch.
He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back.
And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O Frabjuste, Calloo, Calais!
He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe.
So very hard to do that poem without the chortling. So anyway, thank you all for coming. And I guess I really don't have anything to say. Just thank you all for coming.
Tap and say, is this thing on?
No, I already did. Here's really cool. The camera's over there.
Thank you so lucky, John. She was following me for a second.
Is this thing on?
Can you hear me? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
They're after me, Lucky Charms.
That was good.
Edith Gray.
That was one of the last things I thought of.
I figured that would come, but I didn't.